Okay, so we're gonna continue where we essentially where we left off. Um, Now what we're going to start to do is start to integrate Rhino with Grasshopper. So up to this point, we essentially just did everything in Grasshopper, right? Where you just made 2 points, or we made a couple points to make that ladder. And essentially now I just have the example of 2 points to make a line. But if I want to move each one of these individual points, and say for example I have multiple lines, and I have like 20 points, having to move these sliders, these individual sliders, just to move a single coordinate on one point, it can get pretty cumbersome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start to integrate Rhino with Grasshopper a little bit more. So if you have this example, just get rid of it. What I want to do is I'll start off by making a couple points in Rhino, so I use multiple points. For now, I'm going to turn on my grid snap. And I'm going to do, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'll do 6 points. And for now, what I want to do is I want to copy those, let's say, 5 times. There's 2, 3, 4, 5. Or at least copy them so I have a total of 5. So now what I need to do is I need to get these Rhino objects, or these Rhino points, into Grasshopper. So the way you get Rhino objects into Grasshopper, if you go to your parameters tab, I have so many Rhino options that I'm only getting like the first letters of each. But here you go. So if I go to my parameters, and if I look at these black hexagons, all these hexagons are essentially ways of getting Rhino objects into Grasshopper. So whenever you use one of these objects, it's a way of getting it into Grasshopper. So instead of making a Grasshopper point, we're going to use Rhino to get a point, and we would use this one to use instead of making our own line. If we were to use a Rhino line, we would have to use this component. Right? So I'm going to throw in one of these components, the point. And the way you get one of these points, I'm going to start off with this one down here, like where the 0, 0 is. And the way to get this individual point into Grasshopper is on the component, I'm going to right click, go down to set one point, and select that one. And then now you can see that it has the red X on here, so when I highlight it, this turns green. So now I have that my Rhino object now associated into Grasshopper. And what I want to do is work my way through here and add each one of these to a component. So I'm going to put another point. And for now, I'm just going to copy and paste these. I think I have 6. And I want to work with all my points when you select them. Either work from selecting them either all from the bottom and then work your way up, or if you select them from the top, make sure you work your way down on each one. Alright, but since we started here at the 0, 0, I'm going to work my way up. So I'm going to do the second one, set 1 point. On the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, and the last one. Okay, so now essentially what I want to do is I want to make a line that goes through them. So instead of making individual lines for each one, I want to make a polyline. So one shortcut I didn't show you was how do you get to these shortcuts of some of these commands. Right. So for example, the other day when we were making lines, if I double click in here and I type in line, I can go and find, it gives me the commands that start with line. The only thing is you have to know which one you're selecting, right? So again, if you see the hexagon shape, that means you have a line in Rhino that you want to use in Grasshopper. So this would not be the one we would want to use. So this is the line command that we were using the other day. But since I don't really want to use lines because it's going to make too many lines, I want to use a polyline. So again, I double click. See, P line, there it is. Just type in P line and polyline shows up. And what it's asking me for is the vertices. So I started from the top with this point, so I'm going to drag them, hold down Shift, and drag in the rest. So right now, if I select that polyline, I now have a single line right here. So I want to do that again with polyline. First, I'm going to add a point. I'm going to add another polyline. What I want to do this time, instead of adding so many points, I could put all my individual points in one component by right-clicking. Instead of saying set one point, I can do set multiple points. But again, I want to be very careful on how I select these. Because I started with my first polyline, I started by selecting this point, and this one was second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. I want to select them in the exact same order. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And hit enter, and then drag that component into here. And this is doing the exact same thing. These two are doing the exact same thing. The only thing what you'll notice differently is when you select these points, you'll have a single line going into the polyline, and that's just telling you, it's just a visual cue that's telling you that there's only one variable that's associated to this point. In this one, you'll have a double line, and that's just telling you that there's multiple variables. In this case, there's just multiple points. All right, so I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm going to reset the points. So click on that one to go set multiple points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, copy and paste. Reset the points. What you don't want to do is select all of them at once, because you don't know which order it's going to select them in. So again, just start from the bottom, working your way up. And just do this for the last one. Copy, paste. Set multiple. Okay, so now we have all of our individual polylines. I'm just getting these a little bit closer together. So now what we want to do is make lines that start to connect these. Actually, before we make those, I want to divide them. Sorry, skipping a step. So I type in divide curve. Again, make sure you know which one you're clicking on. All right, divide curve. Start off with the first one. And I'm going to need a divide curve for all of these. Each one is going to need their own individual divide component. So I just copy and paste, and I just replace the curves or the points on all of them. There you go. So now they're all they all have their own divide component, and I just want one slider uh, that controls all of them. So when I explained earlier in class, so if I highlight the number, it's giving me a count of 7, right? So this one's telling me that I need whole numbers. So what I showed you guys last time was I can make my own slider, right? And I can come over here and go to slider type, integers, and I can go to values, and I can type in 10, for example. And now I have a number slider between 0 and 10. Okay. Or I can use a shortcut. If I double click, I just type in 10. It automatically knows that 10 I want to be its slider. I type in enter, and it does the exact same thing. It gives me a number slider between 0 and 10. All right, so I can use this one number slider to start to adjust all of my division points for all my divide components. So I drag that into, try to clean it up a little bit so it makes more sense. I drag that into the numbers, so when I start to adjust this, it's dividing those polylines. And just to make this a little clearer, I want to turn off my original points. So for example, what I was showing you the other day, if I right click on that point, I can unpreview it. All right, so hopefully it'll start to clear things up. Another way to do this, if you select all of them and you tab hit the space bar on your keyboard, you get this little pop-up that shows up. And this does something similar to right-clicking. Like here's the bake symbol. Here's the enable and disable. Right, it completely shuts off the component. And then here's the hide and the show of the components. Right, so I can just click on disable preview, and I can do all of them all at once. So now when I adjust my slider, I don't have those extra points getting in the way. Right. So now what I want to do is I want to make lines that connects all these. So again, I just double click, type in line. Again, make sure you know what you're looking for, right? This hexagon shape means that you have a Rhino object you want to associate into Grasshopper. We don't have that. So this is what we need. We need just the regular line component. And I'm going to need, I think, 5 of these. So I'm just going to copy and paste them right now. So then my first division of points goes into A. My second goes into B. All right, so this is no different than the ladder that we made the other day. Okay? The only difference is instead of a line, we have a polyline. But if I continue this, this now goes into the second A. This goes into B. This goes into A. This goes into B. This goes into A. That goes into B. I don't need that last component. So now I can adjust my sliders, and I have that. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pipe all these individual lines. Double click, pipe. Add all of my curves by holding down Shift. Or my curves, all my lines by holding down Shift. I'm going to add all my polylines. Again, I have to hold down Shift. and just give it a radius. Just use a regular slider. Alright, so one thing I want to turn off just so it's not getting it in the way. If you make your radius go all the way down to 0, it's going to give you an error. Because you can't really make a pipe with the radius of 0. But just for now, just take it down to 0 so you can see this on the screen a little bit better. I don't want to see any of these Rhino points. Right, so these are all coming from my divisions. Right, if I select them, I can tell that they're green here. So I'm going to select them all, hit the spacebar, and disable the preview. I'm going to bring the pipe up to some thickness. And in here, what I can start to do now is, since these are actual Rhino points, I can start to move them. I can turn off grid snap. And I can actually now start to have some kind of a design for, say, an example like this is some kind of a pavilion. And essentially I'm just moving the points in Rhino, but everything's being associated through Grasshopper. So everything's updating with just me just simply moving points around. Just get a couple more. And there have like the beginnings of a sketch for some type of a pavilion. Right, and again, because this is all being controlled through Grasshopper and now Rhino, because I have my individual Rhino points, I could always come back into Grasshopper and say, I maxed out on my divisions of 10. I actually want more. So I'm going to adjust my division number, bring this up to 20, and now I can start to divide that by more. Now I have a little bit more control of my radius. So let's do one more thing with the with this radius. Let's say, for example, I want my polylines to be a different radius than my lines, just to give like different types of structure, for example. So one thing I could do is I can have two pipe commands running at the same time. All right. Let me disconnect all of these. Right click on C, disconnect all. The same thing here. Right click, disconnect all. And for the first one, I'm just going to plug in my lines. And on the second one, I'm going to plug in, just temporarily move this over here. Plug in my polylines. Again, holding down Shift. So now essentially I have two separate pipe commands running, and I can adjust the thicknesses for each one individually, which is great, but now I always have to remember that I have two separate sliders that I have to adjust now. All right. Or what I can start to do is I can now use one slider, but I can now use a little math involved to actually tell it, say for example, when this slider is at, let's see, let's do 0.1, that this slider is going to be at 0.05. So it would be half. Or the other way around, sorry. This is, oh, these are the individual lines. So when this is at 1, at 0.1, this one's at 0.05. So it's at half, right? I can start to tell something like this, but again, now I'm always having to adjust two different sliders. Or what I can do is I can use one slider. Let me get rid of that one. I can use one slider and I'm going to plug this into here. Right? But this slider, I'm going to tell it that whatever number is being inputted divided by half. So on the radius, I'm going to right click and go to expression and expression editor. Oops, sorry. Not expression editor. I just want to write in the expression right here. So this would be, for example, using a little bit of algebra, it would be like x divided by 2. But instead of x being the variable, my variable is whatever number I have right here, because that's essentially what it's reading. So instead of x, I'm going to use r. So it's r divided by 2. Commit changes. So now I have one slider, and this one slider is adjusting this number, which these pipes are the actual number that I have inputted, and these pipes are whatever number this is divided by 2, because that's what I have in my expression. Or I could always come back to my expression and divide it by 3, for example, and that gives a different look. Expression divided by 1.5. So they're slightly thinner. And now essentially I just have just the one slider that's adjusting both and adjusting everything. So now I have a couple different variables again. The total amount of division points, which is affecting the total amount of lines, and just one slider that's adjusting two different types of pipe radius. Right, and everything's essentially being controlled in or through these individual Rhino points. That's adjusting everything. Right, and again, this is still living in some kind of Grasshopper world where if I select all of this, it selects the individual points, but it doesn't actually select the actual the actual geometry. So what I can do is I can right click here and go to bake. I'm going to group them all, and I need to bake this one individually. I'm going to group them all. So now when I come back in here and I select that and that, everything's grouped. And I can now move that out of the way. If I go to shaded mode, now I have this thing as actual Rhino geometry. And that's it for this part of the tutorial. So there's going to be another video that'll continue some more examples.